Warsaw, September 1939. The early morning sun stretched its golden fingers over the city's rooftops, painting a deceptive portrait of peace. Horse-drawn carts rattled along cobblestone streets. Children laughed as they chased each other through courtyards, and the aroma of fresh bread from street bakeries mingled with the crisp autumn air. In the quiet suburbs, Jakub Nowak, a 22-year-old engineer in training, adjusted his cap and stepped out of his modest apartment, ready to begin another day. Jakub's life had always been ordinary, filled with the familiar rhythms of study, work, and family. His sister, Anya, a dedicated schoolteacher, was already preparing her classroom for the day, humming softly as she arranged desks and swept chalk dust from a blackboard. Jakub often marveled at her calm demeanor. Even as tensions in Europe simmered, Anya remained steadfast, a pillar of stability in their small family unit. Outside, the streets buzzed with the subtle unease of rumors. Whispers of German troop movements along the border circulated through cafes and tram stops, but many Warsaw citizens dismissed them as fear-mongering. Warsaw is a fortress, Jakub's father used to say. No army can take her. Jakub had been skeptical of his father's confidence, but the city's vibrancy made worry feel distant, almost irrelevant. Jakub's best friend, Marek, a young soldier in the Polish Army Reserves, arrived mid-morning with a broad grin and a newspaper tucked under his arm. "Have you seen this?" Marek teased, pointing to the headlines detailing German advances into Poland's western regions. "It's hardly news, but the editors love drama." Jakub frowned, the weight of responsibility pressing subtly on his shoulders. Marek laughed, ruffling Jakub's hair. "Come on, Jakub, live a little. This city won't fall while we're around to defend it." But even as he spoke, Marek's hand lingered on the rifle slung across his back, betraying a latent tension. That afternoon, the city's uneasy calm shattered. Sirens wailed, echoing off the facades of elegant pre-war buildings. Windows rattled as distant explosions signaled the beginning of an assault few had truly believed would come. Panic spread through Warsaw like wildfire. Families grabbed what little they could carry. Merchants abandoned shops. Streets clogged with fleeing citizens and marching soldiers. Jakub and Marek exchanged a tense glance. "We should report to the barracks," Marek said, his tone no longer playful. Jakub nodded, heart pounding, as they joined the flood of civilians and military personnel converging on the city's defensive positions. As they navigated the chaos, Jakub's eyes caught sight of Anya, leading a group of schoolchildren through the crowded streets. Her face was pale but resolute, and Jakub felt a surge of admiration mixed with worry. He ran to help, lifting a child over a pile of rubble. Together, they moved quickly, dodging debris and the occasional stray bomb. The first bombs fell closer to the city center. Smoke curled into the sky, black and foreboding, blotting out the morning sun. A nearby building shuddered, sending bricks tumbling onto the streets. Civilians screamed. Soldiers shouted orders, attempting to organize a chaotic defense. Jakub felt a surge of fear, the raw intensity of war piercing the veneer of normal life he had taken for granted. At the makeshift command post, Marek and Jakub were assigned to support units, transporting ammunition and tending to wounded soldiers. The noise was deafening, shells exploding, gunfire cracking, and civilians crying out in terror. Jakub, who had only studied plans and blueprints, was now thrust into the stark reality of war. He marveled at Marek's calm efficiency, the way he coordinated volunteers and reassured terrified civilians, even as the city seemed to crumble around them. By evening, the city skyline was transformed. Fires raged in distant districts, smoke thickening the air, painting the city in hues of orange and gray. The streets were littered with abandoned belongings, toys, books, and family photos strewn among debris. Soldiers patrolled tirelessly, attempting to maintain some semblance of order, while citizens huddled in basements or behind makeshift barricades. Jakub found a moment of quiet near a crumbling cathedral. He sat on the steps, wiping sweat and grime from his face, and gazed at the chaos. He felt powerless, yet an unfamiliar determination stirred within him. He knew he could no longer stand by. Marek joined him silently, offering a reassuring nod. "We survive this, Jakob. We help where we can, and we fight for our city. That's all that matters." Night fell, but the terror did not cease. Distant explosions continued to echo, punctuated by the occasional crackle of gunfire. Families huddled together in cellars, whispering prayers or crying softly, while soldiers rotated in shifts, guarding critical positions. Jakob and Marek, though exhausted, continued their tasks, delivering messages, carrying supplies, and comforting terrified civilians. Amid the turmoil, Jakob's thoughts drifted to the life he had imagined. Engineering projects, a peaceful career, simple happiness. That life now seemed distant, almost a memory from another world. The war had arrived, and with it, the harsh realization that nothing would ever be the same. As dawn approached, Warsaw remained under siege, its streets scarred by fire and destruction. Jakob, Marek, and Anya, though weary and fearful, resolved to face whatever came next. They had witnessed the first taste of war's cruelty, but also glimpsed the sparks of resilience, the determination to survive, to protect, and to endure. In the quiet moments before sunrise, Jakob wrote in his small notebook, documenting the events of the day. He felt a strange comfort in recording history as it unfolded. The pages would bear witness to the bravery, the loss, and the unyielding spirit of Warsaw's citizens. For Jakob, Marek, and Anya, the war had begun, not as an abstract concept in newspapers or rumors, but as a visceral, life-altering reality. And so, as the first light of day broke over the battered city, a fragile hope persisted amidst the ruins. Warsaw, though wounded, stood resilient, and its people, ordinary yet extraordinary, prepared for the long, uncertain days ahead. Paris, 1941. The City of Lights now lay under a heavy shadow, occupied by German forces. The grand boulevards and cafes that once hummed with life were now patrolled by soldiers, their boots echoing against cobblestones as citizens moved hurriedly, heads down, careful not to draw attention. Posters declaring loyalty to the Reich plastered on walls served as constant reminders of the occupation, while whispers of rebellion circulated through hidden corners of the city. Elise Moreau, a 23-year-old nurse, navigated these streets with practiced ease. Her uniform was plain, her demeanor calm, yet beneath that composed exterior burned a fierce determination. Elise had lost her younger brother, Philippe, to a German patrol during the early days of the occupation. That personal loss had transformed her grief into purpose. She would resist, she would fight, and she would not allow fear to paralyze her. Her apartment, hidden above a small bakery in Montmartre, doubled as a safe house for the resistance. Tonight, it was alive with activity. Maps were spread across the table, coded messages whispered in tense voices, and parcels of medical supplies stacked neatly in the corner. Elise's team was small but dedicated. Artists, shopkeepers, students, ordinary people transformed by extraordinary circumstances into agents of defiance. A sudden knock at the door made her heart skip a beat. She signaled her comrade, Marcel, who carefully opened the window and checked the street below. Satisfied it was safe, he slipped a folded message into Elise's hands. She unfolded it with precision. An order to sabotage a German communications post near the Gare du Nord. The mission was dangerous, but vital. Intelligence gathered there could provide the Allies with information about troop movements, potentially saving countless lives. Elise spent the afternoon preparing. She inspected her medical kit, packed explosives hidden in ordinary containers, and reviewed escape routes in her mind. The streets were bustling, yet every passerby could be a threat. German soldiers, plainclothes informants, and collaborators lurked everywhere. One misstep could mean capture or death. As night fell, Elise led her team through narrow alleys and abandoned buildings, moving silently. They avoided main roads, slipping between shadows as if the city itself conspired to shield them. The Gare du Nord, usually a hub of travelers, was eerily quiet. The trains halted, the platforms deserted. Elise signaled her team to spread out. Marcel and two others set the explosives near the communications hub, while Elise approached the building to ensure no guards were present. The mission unfolded like clockwork. The small explosions were precise, cutting telephone lines and damaging key equipment. Alarms rang, echoing across the station, and the German soldiers rushed to investigate. Elise and her team melted into the darkness, retracing their steps through the maze of Paris streets. Adrenaline coursed through her veins, but her mind remained sharp, constantly calculating risks and possibilities. They reached a safe house near the Seine, where Elise tended to minor injuries and regrouped. The city's silence was punctuated by distant gunfire, a reminder that the occupation's grip was unyielding. Even in victory, fear was never far. The team celebrated quietly, aware that this small success was just one step in a much larger struggle. Days turned into weeks, and Elise's missions multiplied. She delivered medicine to hidden resistance cells, carried intelligence to Allied contacts, and coordinated acts of sabotage that disrupted the German occupation. Each mission was a delicate dance between life and death. The constant tension sharpened her senses, teaching her to trust instincts honed by necessity. Yet, amidst the danger, there were moments of humanity that reminded Elise why she fought. She helped a family hide in her apartment when their home was raided, shared scarce food with the wounded, and comforted children who had lost parents to the occupation. These small acts, though perilous, grounded her, reinforcing the belief that resistance was not just about fighting the enemy. It was about preserving life, hope, and dignity. Elise's growing reputation did not go unnoticed. The Gestapo, ever vigilant, began tightening their surveillance, sending informants into neighborhoods and interrogating those suspected of harboring resistance members. One evening, Elise narrowly avoided capture when a plainclothes officer entered her safe house. Thinking quickly, she diverted his attention, pretending to be a tired nurse returning from a night shift. The officer left none the wiser, but the incident served as a stark reminder that each mission could be her last. Despite the ever-present danger, Elise remained resolute. She coordinated with other resistance cells, exchanging intelligence and resources. In one daring operation, she helped intercept a convoy carrying crucial military documents. Disguised as a street cleaner, she and her team diverted the vehicle into a narrow alley, incapacitated the guards with carefully timed non-lethal traps, and retrieved the papers. The information was passed to Allied contacts, altering the strategic landscape in subtle but meaningful ways. Elise's courage inspired those around her. Ordinary citizens, once passive under occupation, began to take small acts of defiance, hiding messages, warning neighbors, or refusing to comply with unjust orders. The resistance was not just a group of fighters. It was a movement, a silent army powered by courage, conviction, and the desire for freedom. But the cost was real. Friends disappeared overnight, some executed, others imprisoned. The weight of responsibility pressed on Elise relentlessly. Every mission carried the knowledge that a single mistake could destroy lives, not just hers, but the lives of everyone she fought to protect. Yet, even in the darkest moments, she pressed forward, driven by the memory of Philippe and the hope that someday the city would be free again. One crisp night, as Elise looked over the Seine from a hidden rooftop, she reflected on her journey. The city was quiet, yet the air was thick with tension. Every shadow could conceal a threat, every step carried risk. But she also saw signs of resistance blooming. Windows flashed with clandestine signals, hidden messages passed between citizens, and whispers of hope traveled through the alleys. Paris had not surrendered its spirit. Elise tightened her grip on a small photograph of Philippe, a reminder of both loss and motivation. The resistance would continue, she promised herself. She would endure, fight, and resist, because freedom was worth every risk, and no shadow of tyranny could extinguish the flame of courage in those willing to defy it. And so, in the heart of occupied Paris, beneath the ever-watchful eyes of the oppressors, Elise Moreau and countless others moved through the night like ghosts, carrying with them the defiance of a city unwilling to bow. Each mission, each act of bravery, was a thread in a larger tapestry, a tapestry of resistance, resilience, and hope that would one day see the dawn of liberation. Winter had arrived with a vengeance in Stalingrad, 1942. The city, once bustling with factories and markets, now lay under a veil of smoke, rubble, and ice. Snow clung to ruined rooftops, drifting into streets littered with debris from relentless bombing campaigns. The temperature had plunged well below freezing, and the air itself seemed to bite at exposed skin, turning fingertips and noses numb within minutes. Yet amidst the frozen chaos, soldiers continued their grim duty, aware that surrender was not an option. Sergeant Dmitry Volkov crouched in a shallow trench, his breath rising in ghostly clouds. He adjusted his worn wool scarf, the fabric frayed for months on the front line, and surveyed the battlefield. His unit, part of the Red Army's desperate defense of the city, had been reduced to a fraction of its original strength. Hunger gnawed at their bellies, frostbite stiffened their fingers, and the constant rumble of artillery created a relentless soundtrack of war. Despite the conditions, Dmitry's resolve was unbroken. Every man in his unit understood the stakes. Stalingrad was not just a city, it was a symbol. If it fell to the Germans, the path to Moscow would be wide open. Every street, every ruined building, every rooftop was a battleground, and retreat was not an option. Dmitry's squad was stationed near the factory district, a maze of half-collapsed buildings and smoking chimneys. From this vantage point, they could observe the advancing Wehrmacht forces, whose armor and infantry pressed forward with brutal efficiency. The Germans moved like a tide, relentless and unyielding, yet the defenders of Stalingrad were determined to resist. Each day brought new horrors. Artillery shells tore through concrete, sending shards of stone and steel flying in all directions. Snipers perched on crumbling rooftops, picking off soldiers who exposed themselves even for a moment. Dmitry had learned to move carefully, to anticipate enemy positions, and to trust only his instincts and the men beside him. One night, Dmitry was given a crucial mission: to lead a counterattack to reclaim a factory that had been overrun by German troops. The building was vital. It contained weapons and communications equipment that, if recovered, could turn the tide for their sector. With only a small squad of surviving men, Dmitry navigated the frozen streets, using the cover of darkness to avoid enemy patrols. The attack was a brutal, chaotic affair. Explosions shook the walls, gunfire ricocheted through the empty streets, and the cries of the wounded echoed in the night. Dmitry moved methodically, signaling his men to advance or hold, clearing rooms with a combination of careful strategy and sheer courage. By dawn, the factory was back in Soviet hands, but the cost had been immense. Several of his men lay dead or wounded, their sacrifices etched into the frost-covered ground. Life on the Eastern Front was a daily battle against more than just the enemy. The winter itself was as lethal as any gun or tank. Frostbite claimed fingers, toes, and entire limbs. Hunger sapped strength and morale. Disease spread in the crowded trenches and makeshift shelters. Dmitry scavenged what food he could find, shared his rations with those weaker than him, and tried to keep spirits alive with stories of home and hope. Amidst the carnage, small acts of humanity persisted. Soldiers shared the last crust of bread with one another, or quietly sang traditional Russian songs to remind themselves of life beyond the battlefield. Dmitry, in these fleeting moments, felt the threads of camaraderie holding the shattered pieces of their unit together. One particularly harrowing day, a German assault breached the outskirts of their trench line. Dmitry's unit faced an onslaught of tanks and infantry, outnumbered and outgunned. He ordered his men to fall back strategically, using every ruin, every barricade, and every sniper position to slow the enemy. The firefight lasted hours, a relentless clash of wills that left the earth scarred and bloodied. By nightfall, Dmitry and the surviving soldiers had stabilized their line, though at great cost. Despite the horrors, Dmitry refused to yield. Every act of resistance, no matter how small, was a victory against the advancing tide. He sent scouts to gather intelligence, repaired communication lines under fire, and organized counterattacks to reclaim lost ground. Each success, however temporary, reminded them that even in the frozen hell of Stalingrad, resilience and courage could endure. The civilians trapped in the city suffered as much as the soldiers. Families huddled in basements and cellars, sharing what little food they had, while bombed-out streets claimed lives indiscriminately. Dmitri often risked patrols to deliver rations, medicine, or messages to the frightened residents. These acts, though perilous, reminded him of the purpose behind his struggle. They were not merely fighting soldiers, they were defending the people, the city, and the hope that one day the occupation would end. As winter gave way to a tentative spring, the intensity of the battle did not abate. Stalingrad had become a symbol of endurance, and Dmitri understood that the war was far from over. Yet amidst the destruction, he glimpsed moments of hope. A small group of children playing amidst the rubble, a neighbor sharing a loaf of bread with a stranger, the distant sound of church bells signaling life beyond the battlefield. These fragments of normalcy kept him grounded, reminding him that survival was not merely about enduring. It was about preserving humanity in the face of devastation. Dmitri stood one evening atop a ruined rooftop, surveying the frozen city below. Smoke rose from bombed factories, streets lay deserted, and yet somewhere in the distance, a faint light flickered, a signal perhaps of resistance or simply a reminder that life continued. He clenched his fists, the cold biting through his gloves, and whispered a vow to himself. Stalingrad would not fall. Not while he and his comrades still drew breath. In that moment, Dmitri Volkov became more than a soldier. He became a symbol of defiance against overwhelming odds, a witness to the unyielding strength of the human spirit amidst the crucible of war. The Eastern Front was merciless, unrelenting, and deadly, but Dmitri and his men endured, step by bloody step, fight by fight, holding fast against the tide of history. September 1944. The tropical sun hung high above the island of Poliliu, turning the thick jungle canopy into a shimmering green ocean. The air was heavy with humidity, sweat clinging to every soldier like a second skin. Yet beneath the sweltering heat lay a deadly tension. Hidden Japanese bunkers, camouflaged in dense foliage, awaited every step, every movement. Lieutenant Henry Carter of the U.S. Marines led his platoon cautiously along a narrow jungle trail. The men were exhausted, months of combat etched into their faces, but the mission demanded focus. Poliliu had become a nightmare battlefield. Rocky ridges, coral cliffs, and hidden caves provided the enemy with lethal advantages. Every step could trigger a hidden trap or an ambush. Every sound, a snapped twig, the distant call of a bird, was suspect. Henry had joined the Marines with youthful idealism, but the realities of the Pacific theater had forged him into a leader tempered by hardship. He knew that hesitation could cost lives, and decisiveness, even under uncertainty, was the key to survival. His men looked to him not only for orders, but for reassurance in a landscape that offered neither comfort nor mercy. The first assault of the day came without warning. A hidden machine gun nest erupted fire into the undergrowth, tearing into the platoon's formation. Shouts and gunfire filled the air as Henry barked commands, ordering his men to take cover and return fire. Smoke mingled with the heat and humidity, creating a surreal haze that distorted the chaos around them. Using hand signals, Henry coordinated a flanking maneuver. Two squads moved silently along a parallel ridge, while others provided suppressive fire to pin the enemy. The jungle became a living adversary, roots and vines threatening to trip them, mud sucking at their boots, and insects biting relentlessly. Yet, amidst the struggle, Henry's tactical decisions paid off. They neutralized the machine gun nest, but not without loss. Several Marines lay wounded, others forever silenced by the hidden fury of the battlefield. Hours of advancing brought them to a coral ridge overlooking a network of Japanese trenches and bunkers. Intelligence suggested that this position contained a critical command post controlling local troop movements. Capturing it could disrupt the enemy's coordination and save lives in future engagements. Henry's men took shallow cover behind jagged rocks, scanning the horizon. He could feel the tension, the silent understanding that the coming assault would define the day. Henry devised a strategy, using grenades to flush the enemy from the bunkers, Small teams would move in to secure the position. The initial explosions shook the ground, sending plumes of dust and debris into the humid air. Enemy soldiers emerged from the trenches, only to be met with precise fire from Henry's men. The fight was brutal, the air filled with the acrid smell of gunpowder and the cries of combatants on both sides. Minutes felt like hours. Henry pressed forward, personally guiding a squad through a narrow cave entrance leading to the command post. The confined space amplified every sound: the echo of rifles, shouted orders, the thud of falling bodies. Using a combination of skill, courage, and raw determination, they cleared the bunkers, capturing the position and uncovering critical maps and communication equipment. Even in victory, the cost was stark. Marines huddled together, tending to wounds with limited supplies, their faces etched with exhaustion, grief, and relief. Henry counted his men, noting those missing or injured. Every life lost was a reminder that victory in the Pacific was not measured in territory, but in the courage to face unimaginable adversity. The harshness of the island extended beyond combat. Tropical diseases, heat exhaustion, and limited rations were constant threats. Water was scarce, and soldiers had to improvise, collecting rainwater or scavenging streams while remaining alert for enemy patrols. Nights offered little respite, as the dense jungle carried unfamiliar sounds, snakes, insects, and the occasional roar of distant artillery. Yet, amidst these hardships, camaraderie flourished. Stories were shared around small fires, letters from home read aloud, and the shared struggle forged bonds that transcended fear. Henry often found himself reflecting on the stakes of the conflict. Each island secured was a step closer to the eventual defeat of the Japanese forces, each mission a contribution to the larger goal of ending the war. Yet he also understood the human cost, the young lives cut short, the scars carried forever by survivors, and the haunting memories that would linger long after the battles ended. In one particularly daring operation, Henry's unit intercepted a convoy carrying vital intelligence on Japanese troop movements. Using stealth and careful coordination, they ambushed the convoy in a narrow valley. The firefight was intense, but the Marines prevailed, securing the documents that would guide future Allied operations. For Henry, moments like these underscored the importance of leadership, strategy, and adaptability under pressure. By the end of the month, Peleliu had changed hands multiple times, and Henry's platoon had endured countless hardships. The island bore the scars of conflict, craters, shattered trees, and the remnants of enemy fortifications. Yet, amidst the devastation, Henry witnessed glimpses of perseverance. Soldiers helped one another through injuries, shared the last scraps of food, and wrote letters home whenever possible. Life, in its tenacity, persisted even in the shadow of war. Henry stood one evening atop a coral ridge, looking out over the darkening jungle. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the island. The distant sound of gunfire had faded, replaced by the chirping of insects and the rustle of leaves in the wind. He thought of his men, of the friends lost, and those who had survived, and of the larger purpose that had brought them to this distant, unforgiving place. In the Pacific theater, every step was a struggle, every day a battle, and every victory a testament to human resilience. Lieutenant Henry Carter had learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the resolve to act despite it. And as night settled over Peleliu, he knew that the fight would continue, that survival demanded vigilance, and that the hope of returning home rested on the strength, unity, and courage of those willing to face the jungle and emerge alive. April 1945. Berlin lay in ruins. The once proud city, with its grand boulevards and monumental architecture, had become a shadow of its former self. Smoldering rubble, collapsed buildings, and cratered streets stretching as far as the eye could see. The air was thick with smoke, dust, and the acrid stench of burning wood and metal. Yet, amidst the destruction, the war's end was near. The Allies pressed from the west, the Soviets from the east, and the Third Reich teetered on the brink of collapse. Journalist Anna Fisher navigated the shattered streets, her notebook clutched tightly against her chest. She had come to document the final days of a regime that had brought Europe to its knees. Anna had witnessed horrors that had left indelible marks on her soul. The systematic destruction of entire communities, the plight of civilians trapped in a war they never started, and the aftermath of concentration camps, where the dead and the living bore testimony to unimaginable cruelty. Yet even in the midst of despair, she saw traces of resilience, courage, and survival that spoke to the enduring strength of the human spirit. In one bombed-out courtyard, Anna encountered survivors of a nearby neighborhood, huddled together for warmth and protection. Among them were women who had lost husbands and children, men whose families had been scattered, and children too young to comprehend the full extent of the tragedy around them. Anna recorded their stories, their voices trembling with grief and hope, recognizing that their experiences were as vital to history as the battles themselves. Meanwhile, across Europe, Janek Kowalski, now a seasoned soldier hardened by years of combat in Poland and beyond, marched alongside Allied troops advancing into Berlin. The boy who had once watched tanks roll toward Warsaw had become a man who understood the costs and complexities of war. Every street they liberated brought both relief and sorrow. Janek saw the consequences of years of conflict. Buildings shattered, lives destroyed, and communities uprooted. Yet he also witnessed acts of humanity, soldiers helping civilians, families reuniting, and citizens cautiously reclaiming their city. Elise Moreau, who had survived the dangerous operations of the French resistance, now walked the streets of liberated Paris, observing celebrations tempered by the weight of loss. Her work in the resistance had saved countless lives, yet she carried the scars of friends lost, missions failed, and the constant fear that had defined her every action. Paris was free, but the victory was bittersweet. The cost had been steep, and rebuilding a city and a life would take years, if not decades. On the Eastern Front, Dmitry Volkov had survived the frozen hell of Stalingrad, bearing witness to the resilience of the human spirit in a landscape defined by death. As Soviet forces pushed further into German territory, Dmitry fought not only to defeat the enemy, but to preserve the hope that one day, the horrors he had endured would give way to peace. The liberation of occupied territories was a testament to the courage, sacrifice, and determination of countless soldiers like him, who had endured unimaginable conditions to reclaim their homeland. In the Pacific, Lieutenant Henry Carter led his men through the final stages of island-hopping campaigns that had brought the Allies closer to Japan. The battles had been brutal, and every victory had demanded extraordinary courage. Yet with each liberated island, Henry saw the tangible results of sacrifice. Enemy positions dismantled, civilians protected, and strategic advantages gained. The prospect of war's end was no longer a distant dream. It was within reach. April 30th, 1945. Adolf Hitler committed suicide in his bunker. The news spread slowly through Berlin, but when it reached the soldiers and civilians still alive in the city, it marked a turning point. The Third Reich, responsible for unparalleled devastation across Europe, had collapsed. German forces began surrendering, and the Allies pressed into the city, securing districts that had been battlegrounds for months. The process of liberation was both triumphant and harrowing. Survivors emerged from hiding, cautiously reclaiming homes and neighborhoods, while soldiers worked to restore order amidst chaos. Anna Fisher documented every detail. The faces of those freed from concentration camps, the skeletal remnants of families torn apart by war, and the efforts to bring justice to perpetrators of atrocities. Her writings would later serve as a record of the human cost of war and the resilience required to survive it. Amid the destruction, there were moments of profound humanity. Soldiers shared food with starving civilians. Strangers offered shelter to those displaced, and communities began tentative steps toward rebuilding. Janek helped civilians clear rubble from streets. Elise organized medical aid for the wounded. Dmitry assisted in re-establishing local governance in liberated towns, and Henry coordinated efforts to protect civilians on Pacific Islands. Each act, no matter how small, became part of a larger mosaic of recovery and resilience. As the dust settled and the guns fell silent, The survivors began to reckon with the scale of loss. Families were reunited, yet many were irrevocably changed by grief. Soldiers carried memories of comrades lost. Civilians bore the scars of occupation, and entire communities struggled to reclaim a sense of normalcy. The end of the war marked not only liberation, but the beginning of the arduous task of rebuilding lives and societies. In Berlin, Anna Fischer closed her notebook one evening, reflecting on the enormity of what she had witnessed. She had seen humanity at its darkest and brightest, acts of cruelty and courage, despair and hope, death and survival. The war had ended, but its lessons would endure. Every story, every life touched by conflict, served as a reminder that freedom was not guaranteed. It was fought for, often at an unbearable cost. Meanwhile, Yannick, Elise, Dmitri, and Henry each found themselves at crossroads. They had survived battles across continents, faced death countless times, and emerged forever changed. They carried with them memories of loss, courage, and the unyielding human spirit. Yet in that moment of peace, each also glimpsed the possibility of renewal. The war had taken much, but it had not taken their resolve to live, to rebuild, and to honor those who had fallen. As Europe and the Pacific began the slow, painful process of recovery, the survivors of World War II understood that the true reckoning was just beginning. It was not only about reconstructing cities and nations, but about reconciling with trauma, remembering the fallen, and ensuring that the horrors they had endured would never be repeated. The war had ended, but its shadows lingered, over cities, over families, and over the hearts of those who had survived. And yet, amidst the ruins and the memories, there was hope that humanity could endure, rebuild, and learn. That courage, resilience, and the unbreakable human spirit could carry the world forward, even after its darkest hour. In the quiet of the evening, as smoke rose from the remnants of Berlin, and the Pacific Islands bathed in the soft glow of sunset, for survivors, Yannick, Elise, Dmitri, and Henry looked toward the horizon. Each bore scars of war, each carried memories of hardship, but each also carried hope. Hope that the future could be different, brighter, and free. The guns were silent. The war was over. The reckoning had begun.